The Marvel Cinematic Universe. The biggest pop culture movement since the Beatles, $22.5 billion at the box office, and we found the one guy who doesn't have a clue what we're talking about. With two fellow MCU nerds to help guide his hand along the way, one thing is for certain, we're with him until the end of the line. Welcome to Colin Brain versus the MCU.
On your left, hello and welcome to your new favourite MCU podcast designed for your ear holes.
I like
so in
that.
previous week,
It's cocky.
yes, well, of course, it's always everyone's
Bold.
new favourite podcast.
Confident.
Yeah, we're starting off strong this week.
Heroic even.
Ear holes.
So in previous weeks, we have dealt with, alcoholics flying in tin suits, big green monsters in need of anger management classes. But this week, Marvel head into territory that was one hell of a risk, really, as we deal with Rainbow Bridges, the Frost Giants of Jotunheim, and Idris Elba in a much larger role, luckily, than his fellow The Wire actor, Harlem Bystander number 2. Before we kick off proceedings, please allow me to introduce my co-hosts for today. So, firstly, every time I think of this man, I cannot help but think of Mjolnir itself. Is it because he's always by my side and always willing to back me up in a fight? No, it's because I always want to bludgeon him with the heaviest item I can get my hands on. It's Robert Trott. Rob,
Thank
how
you.
are you?
I thought you were going to say because I'm extremely dense.
No, I want to hurt you.
Brilliant. I'm good. Much like Justin Hammer's test pilot, my son has twisted my back in on itself, and I am now officially a dad because I have back problems.
Oh dear. At least you'll be comfy for the next hour and a bit. And last but not least, if Thor is the god of thunder and Loki is the god of mischief, this man would certainly be the god of beards.
Yeah.
It's Colin Brain. Colin, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing very
I
well
like
tonight.
that. That was a good one, mate.
That was good?
Yep. And ear holes, I'm liking it now. I'm liking ear
Yeah,
holes. It
see,
pops up.
I noticed because we're doing this over Zoom. I've noticed the last 3 weeks I've mentioned designed for your ear holes, and you've raised an eyebrow.
Yeah,
but,
I liked it. No, I normally start giving the head nod, like, yes, he said ear
yes,
holes again.
keep going. Yeah,
You've got it, George.
Keep talking about ear holes.
you seem on board this week. So, Colin, you are obviously living with your girlfriend in your new pad.
Yeah.
So what does she think of this new venture into the MCU? And does she know just as little about it as you, or has she seen some of these films?
I think she's seen all of them.
Wow.
Yeah, or at least... Yeah, I think she's seen the majority of them. At least all like the main big ones. I don't even know which films I'm gonna watch, so I can't. She's definitely seen all the Avengers and all that sort of stuff.
And she's never gone like, Colin, I've just seen this amazing film called Avengers Endgame.
Mate, you know what I'm like when you guys start talking about these films, and we've nearly been together for 10 years. All right, she knows what to bother bringing up around me, and shit like that. I'll just end up going off on a rant for half an hour about how pointless it all is and a waste of your time to sit there and watch them. But yeah, she thinks it's a good. Like she's actually going to listen. She'll be listening to this right now. So
Good.
Thanks for listening, Stacey. You're awesome.
Hi, Stacey. You are awesome.
Yeah.
Rob, let me guess, you saw the film this week with the audio commentary on?
I hope so.
Maybe you'll have to wait and see.
Oh, here we go.
Audio
already.
commentary facts. So, the audio commentary, I have listened to it. It opens up.
Yeah.
And the first little bit of information, I was going to save this by trivia, because you're ready for this. Everyone calls Kenneth Branagh Ken. He says, feel free to call me that as you listen to this commentary. I didn't.
So he was hoping for some sort of interaction.
Yeah, I'm not sure how. Unless maybe you wrote it down, you transcribed it, and then you found a way to almost have a dialogue with him. So what do they all call you, Ken? Kenneth, on the set. Feel free to call me Ken.
Well, Ken, if you're listening, thanks for listening, essentially. So before we jump into the whole background of the film, I had a bit of a paranoia moment in the week. So, because obviously myself and Rob, Colin, we told you that when you search for these films on Disney Plus, not to go into the Marvel section.
Sure.
As some of the titles of the films or the TV shows might pop up, and we don't want these titles spoiled for you. So we tell you what to search for. So then by searching Thor in your results this week, it suddenly occurred to me that all of the Thor movies would appear. Did you take any notice of that? Have you managed to...
No, I had my blinders on. I went in the search, put in Thor, and just clicked on it before I even looked either side of the title or the picture or whatever, Just went straight in.
I know it's not the end of the world, but it still made me a little paranoid, and I couldn't think of a way around it. But having your blinders on seems to have done the job.
Yeah, I just go into the search rather than going into the Marvel section, on Disney+.
Perfect. Well, I did that as well. I typed in Thor, and it come up with...
It does bring up the others, but once I've seen what I want, I just keep my eyes on that, and I'm not looking
We
around.
don't want some sort of Norse version of the end of the world to happen here. We want him to be able to just go on the film he wants and watch that.
We wish, yes. That was what we want to happen. No spoilers for you. So, as always, boys, you relax. Rob, you rest your weary back, as I will provide a background to the film to both Colin and our listeners. As always, Colin, any questions, ask away. I'm sure between us, me and Rob might be able to answer. Or some of the info that you might be needing, I might answer that right now in this little recap as well. Are you ready?
We know Rob's going to jump in with a couple of audio commentaries just through this bit alone, so that's going to be enough for me, I think.
Well, I've already peaked with the little Kenneth Branagh tidbit.
If you thought that was going to be your trivia for the week...
Yeah, you want to see what my trivia is.
I was about to say, that's pretty weak. So...
So far, so good.
Skip the compliments. Let's get on with it.
It's safe to say, and I think I mentioned it at the beginning of this episode, that this was basically Marvel's biggest risk yet. So bear in mind that this was released in 2011. So the Christopher Nolan Batman movies were still massive, and this was also around the same time that the Bryan Singer X-Men movies were being released as well. So all these films were actually somewhat grounded, and maybe you could use the word gritty as well. So with Marvel deciding to make Thor next, and this time create a film primarily set in an entirely different world and universe, but also keeping in mind that an Avengers movie was on the way, Thor needed to feel different to what we'd seen before, but not so much so that should he make an appearance in the Avengers, he wouldn't feel too out of place. Now, there have been plans to make a Thor movie all the way back till the early 1990s, starting with Sam Raimi, who, after directing a film called Darkman, he approached various studios trying to make a Thor movie, but no one was interested. So when it came to Marvel needing a director for this project, they first approached a man called Matthew Vaughn. Now, he was relatively new. He had 2 films to his name. His first one being the Daniel Craig movie Layer Cake. I don't know if you've seen that.
That's good.
And his second movie being a fantasy film, actually, called Stardust. So he had like this blend of comedy, fantasy, and grittiness as well. So all of that kind of ended up with Marvel offering him the film outright, to which in August 2007 he agreed to. However, unfortunately, in May 2008, he was on the project for quite a while. He did leave the project, but he still ended up making a couple of superhero movies in the future. Rob, can you name those films? I'm sure you can straight away.
He did X-Men First Class, but not before he did Kick-Ass.
Yes, he did those as well. So when Matthew Vaughn left the project, Marvel then offered the project to Guillermo del Toro, an incredible director, and this was again an offer which was accepted. Del Toro was a couple of months into pre-production before he was then offered to direct The Hobbit, so unfortunately he left Thor to go make that. And poor Del Toro, he actually never even got to make The Hobbit, so we had a few years without a Del Toro film, which is something I hope we never experience again. So this is where Marvel started actually learning from past mistakes, because they knew that there was a ticking clock, and the release date, they had publicly announced it to be 2010. So time was running out to A, find a director, and B, get the film ready for its release date. So Marvel actually ended up going with a guy called Kenneth Branagh, or was it Ken or Ken? Ken. To direct the film. But he's actually been directing films since 1989. So he has experience in filmmaking, but has never been anywhere near a blockbuster, really. He mainly focused on directing a lot of Shakespeare adaptations, such as Henry V, Much Ado About Nothing, A Midwinter's Tale, Hamlet, the list goes on. He was also a renowned theatre actor, and he directed some plays too. So it's quite the risk when it comes to making a blockbuster like this. But when you take a look at the world of Asgard and the characters that inhabit it, it also kind of makes a little sense. So upon Ken taking up the director's chair, Marvel then officially delayed the film by a year and bumped the release date to 2011, therefore giving Ken and his team more time to work on the film. Now, they also did something that they have done for every single Marvel film since. So they booked in all the actors for example, a 5-month shoot. But then they also made sure that everyone's diaries were free for reshoots around 3 months after filming. So that way, Marvel can then get the film in the editing bay, see how the film's looking, and then decide if they want to add anything else into the film, or maybe reshoot scenes that they feel weren't entirely working. So usually when you hear a film has brought all of its cast back months after finishing filming, that would usually spell trouble. But it's now entirely commonplace for Marvel to do this, and they still do it today. So when the cast sign their contracts, however big these contracts may be, they must be also available for all of these reshoots. And it was actually the signing of Kenneth Branagh that made Natalie Portman sign on to the film. She was initially hesitant when they offered it to her, but when she heard who was directing, she's quoted as saying, "I just thought it sounded like a weird idea because Kenneth Branagh's directing it." So I was like, if Kenneth Branagh is doing Thor... If Ken is doing Thor, that's super weird. Now I've got to do it. But then began the challenge to cast the God of Thunder himself. So Marvel tend to have a fairly rigorous audition process. But this time they actually contacted one actor and told him the role was his outright and he didn't need to audition. That man was James Bond himself, Daniel Craig. But he turned it down, citing that he didn't want to be attached to two franchises at the same time. So other actors that auditioned for the role of Thor was Joel Kinnaman. I know Colin knows him because when we used to live together, we used to watch The Killing.
Oh, that dude. And yeah, he's awesome. Man.
It's the male detective from The Killing.
Don't know what I'd be like as Thor, but he was great in The Killing.
He's very good in The Killing, maybe not as Thor, yeah.
Wasn't he RoboCop in the remake?
He was, yes. Less said about that, the better.
Move on quick. Get back to Ken.
Another actor to audition was Charlie Hunnam, the lead from Sons of Anarchy. We also have Alexander Skarsgård and also WWE wrestler Triple H. Marvel.
Can you imagine that?
Could you? That's so strange. So obviously Marvel ended up passing on all of them. Now Ken decided to audition some actors he'd worked with on stage, most of whom had never been in a film before. One of those actors that auditioned was a man named Tom Hiddleston. His audition footage for Thor is actually on YouTube, and I'll put it in the episode description below as well. He did okay, but he's definitely not right for Thor. But he was so good that he was actually eventually cast as the god of mischief himself, Loki. So whilst all this was happening, a young actor named Chris Hemsworth was making his way over from his home in Australia. He'd had a role in the Australian soap Home and Away before making his way to Hollywood. He did send a tape in to the casting director of Thor, and the tape didn't even make its way to Ken. It was immediately thrown out. So just recently, just after he sent this tape in, he was cast in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboot, playing Captain George Kirk in just one scene. But anyone, including myself, that saw that film walked away from the cinema asking, who was that guy? it's such a powerful and effective scene, and he was, unless you were a fan of Home and Away, essentially a complete unknown. So then Marvel then decided to contact Hemsworth to ask him to come in for a screen test, and in their words, he blew them all away, and so Thor was cast. Now this actually feels quite good to say for once. The production was fairly smooth with Thor. There was no real issues. The reshoots definitely helped this as well, though. And to this day, if you were to ask Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, if he had any regrets about the shoot of Thor, if he would do anything differently, he would answer with this. Definitively, the one thing I would definitely do differently if we had to do it all over again is we would not have dyed Chris Hemsworth's eyebrows blonde in the first Thor movie. Because we were like, Thor is blonde, he has to be blonde. And Chris Hemsworth is great in the role, and he's awesome, and he pulled it off. But there's a couple of shots that I watch now, and I'm like, oh my god, that poor guy. We made him freaking dye his eyebrows. That's just ridiculous. So upon its release, Thor ended up making $445 million worldwide.
400.
And that's less. You see why I want to bludgeon him?
Oh, it's just the dad jokes are awesome. I love it.
Awesome.
Oh my god. So that amount of money is less than Iron Man 2, but it was more than The Incredible Hulk. So it was considered a success, with fans and critics going slightly ballistic for both Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston as Loki. So it feels quite good not to say, oh, this person got kicked out. Now, we do have a little bit of a WhatsApp group for this podcast, and just before we started recording, I said to Colin, out of more than any film we've done so far, guaranteed this is only the fourth, I'll beat you to it, Rob, I was more intrigued than ever to know, Colin, what you thought. So, and you said you had conflicting thoughts. So, what did you think?
I didn't really enjoy this one.
Oh, okay.
It's not an awful film by any stretch.
Mm-hmm.
There were characters in it that I really liked, and there were parts of the film that I really liked. But as a whole, the film didn't really work for me personally.
We shall get into
exactly
to why.
Yeah.
Yourself, Rob, any initial thoughts on the rewatch?
I said to you when we were talking about this after recording Iron Man 2, I said there's an element of this film that means I find it really difficult to watch. And it's one of those things that once it's pointed out to people, if you're not aware that the film does this...
I remember you saying...
what's the word? It might ruin your experience. So I didn't tell you what that thing was.
No, I very politely asked for you not to tell me.
Yeah, and I figure Colin's watched it now. You've watched it loads of times. I'm going to talk about it.
Go for it.
So, are you aware, either of you, of what a Dutch angle is in filmmaking?
A Dutch angle?
Yeah, so that is
No, I'm not.
when the shot is tilted to varying degrees of angles, and it's basically supposed to cause, if a character's disorientated or something is an uneasy kind of atmosphere, you want to build that. Well, this film has a lot of them.
Yeah. So
much so that I decided to count how many there are.
Oh my god!
Whilst watching.
Firstly, what's like an average in a film? If it wasn't to piss you off, is it just 2 or 3 times it would happen?
How many Dutch angles you'll find in a film?
Yeah.
Well, maybe
in a blockbuster.
Maybe.
How many did you say?
I don't know. In a normal drama,
you'd get
maybe 1.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to know
if that it's kind of used
just
as an
every
effect,
now and again,
really, to create a mood. So this film used 182.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's on my count. I might have lost count in all the confusion because you get to a certain point where it's like everything looks level, and you have to remind yourself, no, hang on, Chris Hemsworth looks like he's about to slide off the face of the earth.
Wow.
Which leads me nicely into
There it is.
audio commentary facts. So good old Ken, he said that he wanted to use the Dutch angles because they reminded him of comic panels in which, in a comic, lots of different drawings or scenes will be drawn with these sort of Dutch angles. So the intention was pure.
I have it noted here. I know that there was a severe amount of Dutch angles, and that I could only assume the reason it was there because it was meant to look like a comic book panel. Yes.
Yeah.
So I forgave it for that. Yeah.
I would if it wasn't 182 of them.
There is a lot.
It's a lot.
So did it ruin the film for you?
It does.
Oh, okay.
For the most part, like I think I'm kind of on the same wavelength as Colin. I think there's a lot to enjoy, but overall,
yeah, I like this film quite a bit. But it does feel strangely dated, though. I mean, there's some elements of the comedy and even stylistically, like you mentioned, the Dutch angles, that were kind of reminded me of the type of superhero film we'd see in the early 2000s. So obviously I'm fully aware that the film's already 10 years old, but there's moments that make it feel like 20 years old or 25 years old. But for the most part, for me, it worked. I thought it was an interesting twist on what you can do with the origin story, because obviously most origin stories are about how our superhero came to be a superhero. But this time, our protagonist already starts off with his powers before being stripped of them. I think it's a clever little reverse, and I think it was all done in service of the character, so that all really worked for me. So, I'm very eager to know both of your thoughts a little more. So we'll start the deep... Christ almighty. So we shall start the deep dive. So in 965 AD, Odin, the king of Asgard, wages war against the frost giants of Jotunheim and their leader Laufey to prevent them from conquering the 9 realms, starting with Earth. The Asgardian warriors defeat the frost giants in Tonsberg, Norway, and seize the source of their power, the casket of ancient winters. Now, this is the first moment during the recording of this podcast where I was so sad I couldn't be there in person to watch this with you, Colin, because I'm pretty sure I'd be watching your reaction more than I'd be watching the film, just to see you get thrown into this world and this mythology. So what were you thinking during this whole introduction? Because obviously it's very different from what we've seen back with Tony Stark and stuff like that. Yeah. So were you on board? Did you think, okay, here we go? Or did you suddenly become a little nervous?
No. I mean, with it being the character Thor and knowing that it's a god and all that, I was half expecting it to be in that kind of world. And I was more than happy to dive into that world. The only thing that kind of threw me off a bit, which... It's not that the CGI is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I find that with a lot of modern films anyway, it looks so... everyone looks so brushed up now. It doesn't feel like you're watching real people anymore, and then that kind of takes me out of it a bit, and I feel like I'm playing a video game and I'm about to jump in and start beating the shit out of people. But no, go on.
I think they call that the uncanny valley. So Rob, you'll probably explain the uncanny valley better than me.
So the uncanny valley, the best example that people tend to give is a film called The Polar Express, and it's why sort of Pixar films are so great, because when there's like a fine line between something looking cartoony and something looking realistic, where your brain is seeing something that it's half telling you that's meant to look real, but there's something about it that's off, and it's normally the eyes or the mouth, like getting a lip sync and things like that. So you sort of fall into this weird sort of what they call the valley of like uncanniness, really, where you look at it and you just can't. Something about it just makes you feel uncomfortable. And
almost subconsciously, your brain is going, that's not real.
Yeah.
So the trick is to try and either go, cartoony enough that you can...
Yeah.
That people relax into and go, okay, well, that's not supposed to be real, but I realise that's supposed to be a human.
Yeah.
Or you know your shit and do it so realistically that you go with it.
So, Rob, how long has it been since you last saw this film? Been a while?
Yeah, quite a while. I thought I've got you thought last week's story of me seeing this film for the first time was interesting. So this one, I had a day off work. I took myself to the O2, formerly the Millennium Dome.
Yes.
And I went to see this during the day by myself.
Bliss.
And I was late to go see it. So I missed the whole prologue-y bit with Natalie Portman and Selvig and Darcy in the desert. And I came in just as they were doing the whole Odin voiceover. And I don't feel I missed anything. I don't think I missed anything story-wise.
No, I guess that bit is not
weird.
really needed. The whole beginning bit where they crash into him.
Yeah. So it's an odd thing. They do explain it on the commentary, but I didn't consider it interesting enough to note down. It says something about Ken's approach to audio commentary. But yeah, it's been a while. Me and my wife did do a rewatch of everything, but even that was probably a couple of years ago now. 2 years maybe.
Okay. So let's continue. So in the present, Odin's son Thor, he prepares to ascend to the throne of Asgard, but he's interrupted when frost giants attempt to retrieve the casket. Now, against Odin's order, Thor travels to Jotunheim to confront Laufey, accompanied by his brother Loki, childhood friend Sif, and the warriors three, Volstagg, Fandral, and Hogun. A battle ensues until Odin intervenes to save the Asgardians, destroying the fragile truce between the two races. For Thor's arrogance, Odin then strips his son of his godly power and exiles him to Earth as a mortal, accompanied by his hammer Mjolnir, now protected by an enchantment that allows only the worthy to wield it. Now, I quite like the introduction of Thor here, especially during what I'm assuming is his coronation, because to me this is his Stark Expo, so to speak. Yeah. He's like the man of the hour. He's bleeding charisma and exuberance.
Throwing the hammer and winking at people.
Throwing the hammer is great, yeah, but also there's ego there.
Yeah.
Now, whereas Tony needed to have all of his money and his yes men or his entourage of 100, his whole company essentially taken away from him in order to realise who he's meant to be, Thor needed to have his powers stripped in order to learn, I guess, humility. Because this is someone that travels essentially to a foreign land and starts a war whilst not thinking about the consequences. And I, for one, cannot imagine anyone else in the role as Thor than Chris Hemsworth. I think he's such a find, and right from the get-go, right from the bat, he just seems to get the character. Colin, how did you find him as Thor?
I think he fits the role from an appearance point of view.
Oh, okay, but...
Well, it's not really a but, it's...
What a but, though?
I don't know if this has got anything to do with Ken's input, hearing that he has a more theatrical background, but I did feel like, especially in the first, or some of the scenes with Thor, it felt like he was over-delivering a little bit, and obviously putting on an accent as well. And did you say he's Australian, right?
He's Australian, so it's very...
There was just... It was more at the beginning. I think I obviously just settled into it and got used to it, but I didn't really find that with any of the other guys. Like Idris Elba, for instance, I know he doesn't say a whole lot in the film, but like the way he delivered the lines, it was like... It didn't come across like it was him putting on an accent, whereas I felt like there were times with Hemsworth that it was just a bit like... a bit theatrical, a bit kind of overdoing it a bit. But I thought, he looked the part, and the interactions he had with Loki throughout the film I thought were really interesting, and his dad, and we'll get into the terrible love story part in a little while, I'm sure. But
what about you, Rob? Thoughts on Mr. Hemsworth?
I really like him. I think the when they go to Jotunheim, that whole stuff, like that first fight scene, you even see his cockiness there. It's like everyone else is like, we got to run, we got to go. And he's like, no, I'm going to stay behind, and just pretty much to showboat. I enjoyed him flying through the mouth of that big creature.
Yeah.
And
That was cool.
audio commentary facts. I particularly liked how Ken described that first fight as a dirty scrum.
Yeah, it's not overly. It's not a beautiful fight for sure.
Yeah, he said he wanted it to be very close, very sort of like, not sort of like loads of wide angles. He wanted it to be like wherever you turn, there was another frost giant, all that kind of thing. But yeah, I just like the phrase "dirty scrum." I thought it'd make a good band name if ever we decide we want to have a band together.
There we go. So also this sequence came with its own challenges too, because obviously it's introducing Asgard to the audience. So Colin, like, was it too over the top with its design, Asgard itself? Too restrained maybe? Did you want it to go more? Or did it feel just right?
I thought it felt good at the beginning when Thor was having his, the
coronation, so to
the
speak.
coronation sort of thing. I thought it was good because there was a load of people there, right, for the coronation. And the one thing that kind of threw me off is that for the rest of the film, you never saw anyone apart from him, the 4 dudes that were running around after him, Loki, Odin, and the wife. It was like after that, it just felt really empty. It's like you never saw anyone even in the background doing anything.
That's a really good point that never occurred to me. So I guess it then essentially makes Asgard almost feel less lived in and less like a place.
Well, it just feels like there's 10 people living in this part, and who really cares anymore? Well, at least that's what I thought.
No, it's a good point. What about you, Rob?
I feel the same. I feel it's very shiny, very sort of like when they're doing. I mean, it's impressive visuals showing the clouds, and then it reverses round, and it's kind of like this sort of city and the sort of almost in like a heaven kind of imagery, which obviously it was in Norse mythology, and but it does very much look like a CG establishing shot with these kind of like almost like organ, like. As in piano organ kind of spires.
I've got that noted. The main centerpiece of the
Like
city
the
looks like
pipes.
this giant gold organ. Yeah.
It's a great design, but I just think it looks too. I guess the render of the effect looks too shiny and computer generated to me. It doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
If they'd have used like a miniature for part of that, even like, a bit like how Lord of the Rings would do stuff, I think maybe that would have made me feel like it existed more.
Add more texture to it for sure. I somewhat agree, and I can't believe I never picked up on that about the people as well. That there's tons at the beginning, and then suddenly there's no one. But I think it's worth mentioning that the room that Idris Elba's character's Heimdall, I can't remember what it's called, but the sort of room he looks after, it's where they transport to and from different planets.
The Bifrost.
That is beautiful. I think its use of gold and the entire wall is almost like has like a very much circular design. I think that looked absolutely incredible.
You talked about it a bit, but that scene with Odin stripping him of his powers, like I've heard that was improvised as well. The whole bit where he says, I love Anthony Hopkins anyway, because I think he's got that brilliant ability to be quite ham. And I do love a bit of theatrical ham sometimes. But there's a bit where he says, "You are a vain, green, cruel boy." And then like Chris Hemsworth's like, "You're an old man and a fool." Really, really cool. Like Shakespearean shouting at each other.
That sequence so much.
Yeah, there's a great bit where Loki's like father and goes to intervene,
and he just roars at him.
He just
Yeah.
really enjoyed that. Sandy Hopkins. Have you ever been on his Twitter?
He's nuts.
I just imagined him like that.
He's off his rocker.
Fun fact. This is an audio commentary fact. Just a fun fact I'm throwing in. Stan Lee, big Marvel bigwig, he said that he originally wanted to play Odin if there was a film. Can you imagine? You're a vain, greedy, cruel boy.
Awful. So to continue, Thor lands in New Mexico, where astrophysicist Dr. Jane Foster, her assistant Darcy Lewis, and mentor Dr. Eric Selvig find him. The local populace finds Mjolnir, which S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Phil Coulson soon commandeers before forcibly acquiring Foster's data about the wormhole that delivered Thor to Earth. Now, Thor, having discovered Mjolnir's nearby location, seeks to retrieve it from the facility that S.H.I.E.L.D. has constructed. But he finds himself unable to lift it and is captured. With Selvig's help, he is freed and resigns himself to exile on Earth, as he then develops a romance with Foster. So, Colin, do you maybe want to start giving a thoughts or a couple of thoughts on this, what was it, a terrible love story you called it?
Yeah, that might have been a bit too harsh, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know, man. I honestly, I kind of wish they just kept the film in Asgard, if I'm totally honest with you.
Right, okay.
I think it got a bit too slapstick comedy for me every time it went to America. And I honestly, at any second, I was expecting canned laughter to come on. Like, after some of that, just, I don't know, man. I kind of just lost interest a bit when... And the love story just felt so forced, and there was no build there whatsoever. Forced. And like, I don't know this, right? Because like we said earlier, I've been in a relationship for nearly a decade. Mm-hmm. You guys can't answer this because you're both in happy relationships and you're whatever. But if you're middle-aged and single and you meet another middle-aged single person, is it just normal to instantly just give each other fuck eyes and just like straight away, like no build whatsoever, just straight away every time you're around each other, you're just essentially looking into each other's eyes saying, I want to rip your clothes off? Because that's what it felt like. It was like the minute they laid eyes on each other, it was just too over the top, man. It's like, but again, but is that real life? Because I don't know, because I've been in a relationship for 10 years. So maybe we need to ask someone who's middle-aged and
Twitter.
Single and say, like, when you meet other middle-aged single people, do you just instantly think about,
It was weird. Like, it was good that she wasn't one note and just sort of like nerdy astrophysicist all the way through. But it was like, that bit in Extras when Ian McKellen's like going, "Say Ian, you shall not pass." It was like Jane Foster. Oh my God, he's got his top off.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
giggly.
Yeah,
I can't do anything. And she just turned into sort of like a dribbling moron for a good minute of screen time, and then she'd be like, "It's an Eisenstein-Rosen bridge." So
Yeah.
they sort of like, I don't know if it handled those like.
The transitions between progressing the story and also trying to develop a love story.
It just didn't feel like there was any development. It felt like it was just instantaneous. And I know, like, I gather that Jane is from the comics. Is Jane a character? So, like, I guess to most people who's watched Thor, as soon as they see and hear that Jane is there, they're like, oh, okay, that's the person that Thor and, Whereas for me, it was like, I didn't know that. So it just...
So they're working on the assumption that, the audience already know they're meant to fall in love.
Maybe, I don't know, but it just felt a little forced, and there was no build there. And I just think maybe that's what made it feel a bit dated, because I can imagine these days that again, I haven't watched many films over the last few years, so I don't really know, but I just feel like with the progression of society and the way things are going, I can imagine that love stories with female characters and that are probably approached slightly differently now. It just felt a little old to me, a little old school.
I know completely what you mean, yeah. So I actually quite like Natalie Portman's performance in this. I actually like her performance a lot. But she doesn't get loads to do. But I think she gets more to do than Pepper Potts, and definitely more than Betty Ross. I think she has somewhat of a good chemistry with Chris Hemsworth. And I particularly love the scene in the car as they're driving to the site of the hammer. I think his dialogue to her is like, "You think me strange? Good strange or bad strange?" And it's how she says, "I'm not quite sure yet." She's almost laughing as she's saying it. She's so like the character's full of excitement, but there's also self-doubt in there. And it's a character that has no idea what situation she's getting herself into, but she's enjoying the ride. So she does sort of elevate little moments like that. But I also agree with you in terms of maybe the comedy as well, because I think it's in this scene that we get some of those comedy beats I briefly mentioned in the beginning that do feel a little dated for me. So there's the scene, I think the main bit for me was the scene when they try and sedate Thor, and it's it's only, I mean, it's an okay scene, but it's only until the end of the scene where he sort of face plants the glass on the door mid-sentence. And as his face slides down it, they put in this really like over the top, like sliding noise. And I think you were correct there. A canned laughter would have been mildly
it's like the oh, she hit him with her car. She hit him again.
Yeah, that whole thing. And also, like, I wasn't quite sure of what was going on in the time frame while they were there, because I couldn't tell if Thor had been there for like just the one day and they kept bumping into each other like an hour or so later, but because it was bouncing around between other things. And obviously, I mean, you're going between different realms anyway, so I'm sure time runs differently. But yeah, the main thing is that when it was more in Asgard, it felt a bit more like it was a bit more serious. The tone was more serious, and things that were going on were a bit
almost
more
Shakespearean and heightened.
Yeah. And then you'd go down, and it was like you had jumped into a sitcom for like a little while. And I don't know if that's what they were going for, but if they were, cool. But it just didn't really work for me.
I think it was what they were going for. That sort of juxtaposition, because I will admit the running gag over them running him over did work for me the second time they hit him. As they say, right, we've now got how the hell are we going to find him? And she reverses into him. It worked for me. I'm sorry. But I love, and I mean this, I love the fish out of water gags. They are for me what works best on the scenes from Earth. So you've got him in the coffee shop, or the cafe, sort of downing his coffee and asking for another one by smashing it on the floor. Pitch perfect for me.
No, that was cool. I did like that one.
I love when he enters the pet shop proclaiming, "I need a horse." That's genius. And Hemsworth is again incredible. And the cap to that scene is even great, where we only sell cats and dogs. Well, then give me one big enough to ride. Brilliant.
No, I agree. I like those Crocodile Dundee style moments in which he's sort of out of. But I agree. It's sort of the weird. I don't even think all of the comedy from the sort of science gang is bad. I think Darcy has some nice moments, like when she tases him and she's like, "What? He's creeping me out." And I think things like that work.
Her pronunciation of Mjolnir as meow meow always gets a giggle out of me.
Yeah, so I don't think it's all awful, but there's just so much being thrown at the wall. And like Colin said, when you're in Asgard, it is like 100% leaning into it with sincerity. There's no kind of tongue-in-cheek moments. It is just sort of, this is, you've got lines like, do not mistake my appetite for apathy, which I want on my gravestone personally. It's just, those kind of lines. And then you go to New Mexico and it is very... It can feel a bit sort of like unbalanced, I think. I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, for sure. But this whole sequence as well, it has the introduction of Jeremy Renner as Clint Barton, known to the comic book fans as Hawkeye. So Hawkeye, he's the guy, Colin, he's got the bow and arrow above Thor as he's trying to get the hammer. So Hawkeye, in the comic books, he's an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. and sometimes member of the Avengers. He was completely uncredited in this film, and fans were not expecting Jeremy Renner, or Hawkeye, to make an appearance. So what surprised people even more was that Jeremy Renner was actually quite in demand at this time, because he had just appeared as the lead in 2008's The Hurt Locker. That film actually won Best Picture at the Oscars. Actually, I think it won 6 Oscars overall. And Jeremy Renner himself was nominated for Best Actor. So to see him, A, pop up in Thor, and B, in actually a very, very, very brief role was quite surprising.
Yeah, he definitely wins the Next Time, Baby award.
Yes, there it is. I've even got, I promise you, I've got it noted right here. Rob, please say Next Time, Baby. So that has made my night. So, to continue, Loki discovers that he is Laufey's biological son. He was adopted by Odin after the war ended. Loki confronts Odin, who then wearily falls into the deep Odin sleep to recover his strength. Loki takes the throne in Odin's stead and offers Laufey the chance to kill Odin and retrieve the casket. Sif and the Warriors 3, unhappy with Loki's rule, attempt to return Thor from exile, convincing Heimdall, gatekeeper of the Bifrost, and the means of travelling between worlds, to allow them passage to Earth. Aware of their plan, Loki sends the Destroyer, a seemingly indestructible automaton, to pursue and kill Thor. So, we've made it this far and we haven't discussed Mr. Tom Hiddleston as Loki himself. What did we think as Loki?
I think he's great, personally.
Colin.
Yeah, he was my favourite part of the film. I mean, I know I've been trashing the film quite badly up until this point, but I think it's probably because I just wanted to see a film on Loki. Like I don't care about. Well, I say I don't care. It's like every time he was in a scene, I was interested again. I thought he was great.
That scene where he comes down to Earth and he chats to Thor and he's like, tells him that Odin's dead. Oh, he's good.
Tom Hiddleston
really good.
is great. I love him in this. And I'm in full agreement. He might be my favourite thing in the film.
Definitely mine.
Because he's such a conflicted character as well. So there was times, especially in like the latter half of the film, I found myself questioning, like, what's Loki's motive here? Like, what's motivating the character? And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Now, usually I consider, if I ask that question, I'd consider it bad filmmaking. But I think there are parts where it's almost done on purpose, because on one side of the coin, it would appear that Loki simply just wants to be loved by his family and make them proud. But then the realisation that, he's been lied to his whole life obviously conflicts him, and it brings out this villainous side to him. And there's this moment towards the end, I think, which we'll get to properly next, where himself and Thor have their climactic fight. And he's giving the typical villain speech at the end. But whilst he's doing it, he's got tears pouring down his face as he's doing it. He so desperately wants to kill Thor and be the ruler of Asgard, but at the same time, he loves Thor deeply as a brother. And that is one hell of a villain and one hell of a performance.
Yeah, he's just brilliant. There's so many nice little moments with him. Like, I think just following that moment where he talks to Thor and he tries to lift the hammer himself and realises I'm not worthy either. That's really nice because nothing's said. And while we're talking about things, people not being worthy, Excelsior! Stan Lee's bumper isn't worthy either. And Stan Lee's cameo of this episode?
Oh.
This film, I suppose, kind of is an episode. He is the driver of a truck that's trying to dislodge Mjolnir.
Colin, are you recognising Stan yet?
Yeah, I just looked for Hugh Hefner.
There we go. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I keep forgetting.
No. I did pick up on him this time. I think I finally know what he looks like.
Okay, good.
I love Odin's baller move, which I'm going to remember for when my son's an angry teenager. That Loki's just yelling at him, but he just sort of falls asleep. Can you imagine?
It's true.
Imagine you did that to your parents.
And
they're just full on yelling at you.
I don't have it noted here, but I did read it earlier on that Odin's sleep is not in Norse mythology at all. It's something that Stan Lee actually created for the comics, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
So,
I like that.
The Warriors find Thor, but the Destroyer attacks and defeats them, prompting Thor to offer himself instead. Struck by the Destroyer and near death, Thor proves himself worthy by his sacrifice to wield Mjolnir. The hammer returns to him, restoring his powers and enabling him to defeat the Destroyer. Kissing Jane Foster goodbye and vowing to return, he leaves with his fellow Asgardians to then confront Loki. Now, how did we find this action scene? Now, I hope I'm not stealing any trivia here, Rob, but it's worth mentioning that a couple of months before this scene was shot, the entire town didn't actually exist. They literally built a town out in the desert only to destroy it during this action scene. And then once filming was over, tore it all down again and it became desert again. I think that's the magic of filmmaking right there.
I don't know if that works. That's another reason, like similar to what Colin said about Asgard, I feel about the New Mexico town. I mean, I don't know much about New Mexico, so maybe these sort of towns are commonplace, so they're just surrounded by seas of desert. But it just doesn't feel lived in either.
Yeah, I think, I agree.
So, yeah, it just felt like they were fighting the Destroyer in a set for me.
And that was why it felt like I wasn't sure of the time frame, because like how easily they just keep bumping into one another, and also like how quickly the Shield just managed to prop up this gigantic setup around a hammer. Like, again, I couldn't tell if it had been days or hours. It was like, I don't know why this stuff's... You know what I mean?
It's another good point, mate, because, in my head, it was all set over 2 days. Which then, considering Thor arriving and that night having all of that constructed,
it just
does require a stretch of logic.
There's something interesting, which I think we could talk about without... It doesn't really run into... I can talk about it without mentioning things that are coming up. But these first lot of films are referred to as taking place within a week. And it's known as Fury's Big Week. So...
Okay.
Including Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2?
Yes.
Set in the same week. Oh, because, he's watching it on the news, isn't he? Ivan Vanko, of him...
Yes.
Oh, I guess it is all set in the same week, yeah.
Which is pretty mad. There was a lot of moments in this film, and especially in sort of the Destroyer coming down, there's a moment where Coulson's like, is that one, or someone's like, is that one of Stark's?
Oh,
He's
that
like,
was cool.
I don't know,
like
he doesn't tell me anything. And there's a moment earlier on, obviously we mentioned Hawkeye as another little Easter egg. There's a moment earlier where Selvig is talking about, I don't trust S.H.I.E.L.D. They once, a gamma scientist that I knew had a run-in with them. And it's all them trying to like tie what's happened so far all together so that even if you're not really 100% feeling Thor, you're like, oh, this is Hulk somewhere in this world.
It's funny because I'm starting to pick up on all those little things now, which if I had obviously watched it on its own...
So, if this was randomly on TV, let's say a month ago...
That would have meant nothing to me.
Suddenly Agent Coulson sees his suit and says, is that one of Stark's? You would have been straight over your head.
Yeah.
But they are connecting... They're slowly starting to connect the dots now, So looking back, I don't think I was ever really a massive fan of the Destroyer fight scene sequence. I think I found it all a bit too simplistic. Like you said, it all pretty much takes place on one street. And there's not loads in terms of like interesting or creative action beats. But this time I actually liked it a little more than I used to. I think it's because it's an action scene that's rooted in character. I don't think the scene is meant to be flashy or full of stunts or anything like that. I think its intention is purely for Thor to get his ass kicked, really. Because it's the moment that by taking the Destroyer on, knowing it's likely going to kill him, is where he finally becomes worthy of Mjolnir and the power of Thor. And I know Colin's going to shake his head, but I got goosebumps the moment he raises his hand, out of the dust to catch Mjolnir as it's, flying towards him and the music's swelling. It worked for me. I'm such a fanboy, I know.
I didn't hate that bit, dude. I didn't hate that bit.
Oh, good.
I didn't get goosebumps, but
they'll come later.
There was one bit of that fight with the Destroyer that I found quite creative, and it was when he had been like impaled on that thing, and then he starts doing all this twisting and moving around. Like that bit, I thought was really cool.
Nice design
of
the creature, the robot.
Yeah.
How did you guys feel about the Warriors 3 being described as Xena, Jackie Chan, and Robin Hood?
Oh, the Jackie Chan moment, really.
Oh, dude, that's not aged, is it?
No.
Yeah, the Jackie Chan one hit me hard.
Yeah, I almost fell out the seat. I thought,
I couldn't believe that was allowed in. Yeah.
What's it? So the other ones are Xena and Robin Hood.
Robin Hood.
I'll allow it. Jackie Chan.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, it's I agree with you, George, what you're saying about the Destroyer. It is more
it's just
the
power,
idea of, right, well, these people, these warriors can sort of throw everything they got at it, and what it comes down to is Thor having to make the sacrifice play. There's nothing else that can be done. Yeah. He has to put his life on the line. And it's that lesson of, like we talked about earlier, humility and, that becoming that hero and making that decision that a king might make, like, I'll die to protect all these people, if that's what it takes. The idea behind the scene works. I just wish there was more in the sort of going on. Yeah, even if it's people
more
watching
maybe
this myth
saving
happen,
the citizens would have been nice.
or even just people witnessing it. No one on Earth has seen this god before, or at least since like Viking times. So the idea of seeing, this beefcake of a dude turn into a god before their eyes with, lightning and thunder and hurricanes and things like that I just feel like there should have been more townsfolk reacting to stuff. I think there's one shot of a woman running with her kid that I can remember, and other than that,
it's a good point.
Even just shield agents going, what are we dealing with here? I think Coulson turns up at the end, he's like, we're going to need to debrief you or something.
Yeah.
And then
He has one reaction shot, essentially, and it's not a Thor, it's of the Destroyer almost building up the flames in his system, and he just says, here we go. That's basically, he's only really...
Son of Coal.
Son of Coal. I love that moment. So... in Asgard, Loki betrays and kills Laufey, revealing his true plan was to use Laufey's attempt on Odin's life as an excuse to destroy Jotunheim with the Bifrost Bridge, thus proving himself worthy to his adopted father. Thor arrives and fights Loki before destroying the Bifrost Bridge to stop Loki's plan. Stranding himself in Asgard, though, Odin then awakens and prevents the brothers from falling into the abyss created in the wake of the bridge's destruction. But Loki seems to commit suicide by allowing himself to fall when Odin rejects his pleas for approval. Thor makes amends with Odin, admitting that he's not ready to be king. Meanwhile, on Earth, Jane Foster and her team search for a way to open a portal to Asgard. So then, as for this final fight scene, where I think we can finally be a bit more flashy because Thor now has regained his powers. Do you prefer it to the fight with the Destroyer? Is it a better fight scene?
I like that you get to see Thor do his thing again, but with a different mindset. When he just puts the hammer on Loki and just walks...
uses it as a paperweight on Loki,
there.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great little moment. And like you said, like... it's more about character, I think. When he's smacking that bridge, and breaking it, you know what that means
it's
to him.
It's the sacrifice play again.
Yeah. It does work for me, I think.
Colin, for you, the climax of the film?
Yeah, I thought it worked. And we didn't really touch on it right at the beginning of the film. Not right at the beginning, but when Thor goes to whatever it's called.
Jotunheim?
Yeah, there you go. You really see like the power of the hammer from at the beginning there, which we haven't really discussed.
Yeah, Mjolnir itself.
Because
it's badass. Yeah.
You really see how crazy it is, which I really liked about that scene anyway. But that's from before I forgot to mention that. But yeah, I liked them. It just reminded me of Mario Kart a bit though, Rainbow Road. I had that vibe going on a bit, but I thought it was good.
Bastard level.
Loki's definitely not done though. We know that for sure, right? How many Thors are there? You're not even going to tell me.
We're not going to tell you.
No, okay.
Thor.
Because he didn't... Because you saw him kind of fall into... He kind of got sucked into something. It wasn't like
some sort of portal or black hole.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. I find it so funny. The effect of when he just sort of like falls like a Sabutio man. It's such a dodgy effect that really sort of hampers the moment.
I think you guys kind of nailed it, whereas I didn't really see the emotional side of the Destroyer fight scene. To me, it was just like... it was more just this giant, wrecking machine coming down, destroying a load of stuff, and Thor gets his hammer back and destroys him. Whereas with the next one, that one did feel a lot more like there was a bit more emotion behind it. Because it was obviously him versus what he thought to this point was his brother and all that sort of stuff. And with Odin popping up, it was a nice scene, man. I actually quite enjoyed that bit of it.
Cool.
But again, I liked most of the stuff that happened in Asgard. That I didn't really have that many issues with that side of it.
And I like that you're on the working theory of I didn't see the body, so they are not dead.
Oh, of course not, man. Come on, that's just film 101, especially when there's friggin' like 30-odd films. I mean, they're not going to kill him off that quick, are they?
A couple of times in this episode, I think I've compared Thor to Tony Stark, and I think it's this ending that shows they actually are a little different from each other, because although they've both been taught lessons in humility and responsibility, the first Iron Man obviously ends with Tony Stark still with that Stark ego and announcing to the world that he's Iron Man, whereas this ends with Thor basically admitting that maybe he's not ready for the throne of Asgard. Next time, baby. So, obviously that was quite a deep dive. So maybe you want to sum up what you thought of the film in, I don't know, 1 or 2 sentences. Start with Rob.
I think when I first saw it, that ending really threw me. Because I was like, what? That's it? That's a weird ending. But I think the ending's probably one of the things I like the most about it, because it's so melancholic. Just like, yeah, she searches for you as the last line, and like he's just stuck there. I just thought, that's great. Like you said, it's different to, Tony not being able to face anyone else taking credit for Iron Man.
Yeah, sure.
And I think overall I like it. I think it's fine. But there's just a few bits that just feel a bit, I don't want to say TV as if that's a slight, but it kind of feels like a sort of, the New Mexico stuff does feel cheap to me. And obviously this was before Thor. They knew what Thor could do. So I kind of have to forgive it for that, but I don't find it as enjoyable to watch as some of the others, because it does feel a bit disjointed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've probably been a bit too harsh throughout this whole episode on the film, because I didn't really dislike it, or I had fun watching it. But to me, it was one of those films that if you just switch your brain off and just take it in for what it is on face value, then it's probably fine. It felt like a big Hollywood blockbuster to me, one of those ones that, a popcorn flick that's for the whole family, kids can watch it, parents can watch it, you just sit there and just indulge. And personally for me, that's just not really the type of film that I like watching. I mean, I know I'm definitely in the minority of that, and who the fuck am I to say anything when they're making millions of shit like this? But personally,
I think it's you and Martin Scorsese.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, I've got someone in my corner. But yeah, so personally, if I was to sum it up, I found it a little frustrating just because I didn't really care about Thor. I cared more about Loki.
Interesting.
So it was just one of those. It's a bit like The Dark Knight. You just want the Joker to be on the screen every 5 minutes. You don't want to hear Christian Bale fucking farting through his mouth every time he speaks. It was just nice.
Yeah. So let's get on to ratings then. So Rob, out of 5.
I think I would give it the same as Iron Man 2.
Which was?
Which was 2.
Oh, 2 out of 5. Wow.
I think, was it 2 out of 5 or 2.5? 2.5 we gave it.
Okay.
Because we did the same rating.
Okay.
Wow, I thought you liked it, Rob.
Yes.
I did, but I liked Iron Man. But the thing is, my ratings are coming in
See,
thinking,
you screwed yourself on week 1.
No, I didn't.
You went too low on Iron Man.
No, because if you go...
he gave Iron Man 1 3. You gave Iron Man 2 2.5.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm giving this 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I feel it's not as good as Iron Man, but it's not as bad as Incredible Hulk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
I've got you can't, high fidelity, right? That whole thing about making the perfect playlist. You don't want to blow your load too soon and give every Tom, Dick and Harry film 4 stars, because they're not all 4-star films.
Well, if it starts on a 4-star film, you give it 4 stars.
Or you give it 3 stars and then change it to 4 stars.
I did do that, yeah.
You did.
Oh, Jesus Christ, this is fun.
Colin, out of 5?
Yeah, I mean, again, this sounds kind of harsh, but I'm going to give it a 2.5 as well. But I mean, I did give Iron Man 1 a 3. I gave The Incredible Hulk a 1.5, and then I gave Iron Man 2 a 3.5. So I think 2.5 is fair, although that might seem a little... I did feel like giving it a 3, but I enjoyed Iron Man 1 so much more, so it's going to have to be a 2.5 for me.
It's 3.5 for me. Yeah, I gave Iron Man Thor. So yeah, it's to me it's the second best so far, I think. But we are only 4 films in, so we shall see. So it's my favourite. I almost did it, but So it's my favourite part of the week. It's trivia time.
You know too much for your own good.
Now that's what I call using the old head.
Yeah, baby.
So,
Trivia time, baby.
So who went first?
I always forget.
Whosoever wields this trivia, be they worthy, shall possess the respect of Colin Brain.
Yes.
Yes, I love it.
And then I've got to do my first trivia, my trivia, which I think I've discovered the most interesting quote from a character in regards to a film. So, you remember the character Fandral, don't you? The Robin Hood-y one that was mentioned in the lineup.
Yeah, Jackie Chan's buddy.
Zena's pal. So, Fandral actor Josh Dallas said this of his point-end poking sword boy. He said, and I quote, Fandral would like to think of himself as the R. Kelly of Asgard.
Uh-oh.
He's a lover, not a fighter. You know what I'm saying? I've seen Trapped in the Closet and Keep It on the Down Low, all that kind of stuff. Fandral's a fun-loving guy. He's a ladies' man. It's always debatable how successful he is at that. He thinks he's pretty successful. He thinks that all the ladies love him, and if they don't, then they will soon come around to the idea of loving him.
Wow.
That's all very R. Kelly to me, isn't it?
Well, talking of other things that haven't aged very well,
Yeah.
that is not
So that
what
is
you
my
wanna
bit of
be-
trivia, that quote exists around a character of which has no depth, and none of that
He
was
just
clear.
has a pointy sword.
To be honest, you could have put a gun to my head and said, what was that character's name? And I would have said, just pull the trigger, mate. I ain't got a
You
fucking
say, I
clue.
don't know, but he gives off an R. Kelly vibe.
Oh, dear.
Oh, shit, that's good trivia, man. I don't know why you were so worried about that one. That was good. Colin, George.
Okay. So, Marvel wanted a way to almost pay tribute to some of the writers. What are you laughing at?
It's just, I love how serious you take this shit, man. It's Rob's
up.
just pulling some R. Kelly quote out. And
dear.
you're just like, right, Marvel. I'm about to reel off some essay about something. Come on, let's get it.
It is a bit of an essay. So, Marvel wanted a way of paying tribute to some of the writers and illustrators of the original Thor comics from the 60s and 70s. So what better way to pay tribute to those wonderful creative people than by giving them actual roles in the film itself? So 33 minutes into the film, the first man to approach Mjolnir is a man called J. Michael Straczynski, and he's one of the original writers in the Thor comic books. Now, obviously, we've got Mr. Stan Lee there as well, as Rob pointed out for us. But also at the end of the film, at about the 1 hour 40 minute mark, there's a banquet sequence after the battle has been won, and Lady Sif, Xena, can be seen sitting next to and laughing with an old man. That man is called Walter Simonson. He is a comic book artist and writer whose work on Thor around 40 years ago was highly renowned and acclaimed. So Marvel managed to get in contact with both of these guys and pay their respects to him by giving them roles in the film.
That's nice. I like that. I mean, I like them both for different reasons. This is a tough one for me. George's has a lot more work and effort gone into by the season.
And Rob
I'd
read
like
out a
to
quote.
see if George. I'd like to have seen George find this quote. Like, who knows that? I can guarantee any Tom, Dick, and Harry could go on IMDb facts and find out what George just said. But they'd be hard pressed to find that whole quote.
See, I kind of want to know where you got them from, and that's what I'd judge it from. If you've just gone on IMDb and gone on trivia and grabbed these, then you may as well not even bother.
So,
Please tell me that's not the
do you
case.
think all that trivia and all that was all from the same source? That was wrote firsthand by me, but I've pulled the trivia from various different places. Yes, of course.
Okay.
I'm not going to know it off the top of my head.
No. I mean a bit more of a deep dive than just going on IMDb and then going to the trivia section. You know?
I found the R. Kelly of Asgard bit on IMDb, but then I went digging because I wanted to find the whole quote, and I wanted to even prove if the trivia was right. And
It is.
By George, it is right. What are you going to go with, Colin?
This is a really
you like
hard
music,
one.
don't you? It's got a music link.
No, I'm gonna go with George on this one because it brings it back level again. But they were both.
You
they
win
were
this
close.
round, O'Connor.
Yeah, two each, right?
Next
You
time,
are
baby.
worthy.
And let's remember, Rob, you're starting on next week's one.
No, I am.
No, you are. Oh yeah. Jesus Christ.
We only did it 5 minutes ago.
Jesus.
Next time,
Next
baby.
time, baby. So that's another
Okay.
week. As always, it's been a pleasure, boys. So next week, we're back on Earth. But this time we're going back in time a little bit as we head to 1942 to watch Captain America, the First Avenger. Rob, say bye.
Bye.
Colin, say bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Next time we meet, let it be in peace and friendship.
This is as far as you're going to get tonight.
Such valuable stuff. All in a nice work.
Sweet dreams, little friends.
Look out! He's escaping! I fear we have not seen the last of him.
And as always, we are not done yet. We have our post-credit scenes for this episode. So, Selvig is taken to a S.H.I.E.L.D. facility where Nick Fury opens a briefcase and asks him to study a mysterious cube-shaped object, which Fury says may hold untold power. But an invisible Loki prompts Selvig to agree, and he does. So, Colin, it would appear that Selvig is now under the control of Loki, and it would also seem that he might want to get hands on his mysterious cube. Rob, set that up for me.
What?
Next time, baby.
Oh, next time, baby.
So
I won't pay attention, I'll be
I
honest.
noticed. So remember those contracts that I mentioned in our last episode that everyone, no matter what role you were in, had to sign a 6 or 9 picture contract. Now,
Yep.
you've kind of hinted at this as well. Marvel must have been counting their lucky stars because once this was released, the fans and the public went nuts for Loki. So on one hand, they were over the moon that the fans had really fallen for a character because at the end of the day, that means money. But the fans had also, in fact, fallen for a villain. So the purpose of the villain is obviously to create someone that you want your audience to hate. So, Rob, is this now a problem for Marvel, or do you? What do you think they should? I know because kind of know how it goes. So
Yeah, I'd be asking Colin this.
so Colin,
think it's gonna be
is
a
this a
problem?
problem for Marvel of having the fans love the villain?
Well, if you're looking at it from a business point of view, 100% no, because like you said, it makes money, doesn't it? And again, if you just listen to what I've been saying for the whole episode, I want to see more of Loki. I don't really care about seeing more of Thor. If I'm totally honest with you, I'd be quite happy if he doesn't pop back up again. I know he probably will, and I'm sure he must be one of the Avengers, I guess. Which I find
Maybe.
which is odd because I feel like him being on Earth just didn't work. So, I mean, I don't know how they're going to do all of this shit with the Avengers getting them all together and how they're all going to work, but that's for another time. But,
So maybe him standing next to, for example, like Tony Stark,
Iron Man or whatever.
is that going to just be really weird? Is it going to work?
Well, see, this is the problem I've got, and this is the worry I've got, right? Because, look, I'm going to be honest, I'm watching these films now, and we're doing this, so I want to enjoy them. Like, I don't want to watch these and have to come on here once a week and just kind of be like, yeah, I didn't really like it, because then I come across like a miserable bastard, but I'm going to be honest either way. But it is a little bit worrying, because I really didn't like Thor in anywhere other than where he was from. So, and I just hope that when they bring these characters together, they don't go down that slapstick humor route, because that's just not my thing. It's just not my style of humor. And I feel like if they do, then there might be a lot of me just going, I didn't really like it,
Basically, I'm very intrigued to know what you think of the future films, obviously.
But Loki, I thought he was great, and I liked the post-credit scene on this one.
It does. It
It's the
sets up
longest
more
one,
than
isn't
what
it?
you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a bit longer, right? It seems a bit longer.
It's
than
the longest
others.
one to this point that we've seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a scene, whereas the rest are like, I suppose like the Iron Man one's very brief, but it is a scene. Iron Man 2 is obviously just the image of the hammer. So this one sort of seems to be like plot more than anything.
Yeah, but it didn't really set... Like, I had no idea that the next film in the series was going to be Captain America, because it didn't really set anything up from it, which, it doesn't have to. But whereas, like, obviously the Iron Man 2 one was Thor's hammer, so I gathered pretty quick
Well,
that the next
maybe
film was gonna be
after
Thor, but-
Captain America, if you go back and rewatch this post-credit scene, you might be surprised.
Oh, yeah. I'll do that then. Yeah.
So, as always, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. If you haven't left us a review yet, how about for this week we'll set you a little challenge. In your review, tell us your favourite Thor moment in the franchise, if he is ever to pop up again. It doesn't have to be just from this film, and we will obviously keep Colin far away from the reviews. Thanks again for listening, everyone. Colin, say goodbye again.
Take it easy, everyone.
Rob, say goodbye again.
Take care, true believers.
And again, thanks for joining us. Stay safe, stay well, stay nerdy.